office demands my feminine body development. I stood at the urinal in the office washroom, lost in a quiet daydream. My thoughts kept drifting back to the previous day, how I had worn a full set of women's undergarments beneath my business suit. No one had noticed. Not a single glance, not even a hint of suspicion. The secrecy of it thrilled me. I found myself thinking about how I could take it further next time. Maybe a bit of extra padding, something subtle enough to pass unnoticed. Perhaps even going without socks. The trousers I wore were long enough to hide my ankles if I was careful. Even my secretary, known for her sharp eye and attention to detail, hadn't picked up on anything. It made me wonder just how far I could push this without anyone realizing. Do you really want to see how far you can go, without them knowing? The deep, commanding voice behind me shattered my thoughts. I jolted in surprise, nearly jumping out of my skin and making a mess in the process. I was certain no one had been in the washroom when I entered, and I hadn't heard the door open. My focus broke instantly, and I hurried to compose myself, zipping up as I turned around. "What did you say?" I managed, still shaken. "You were thinking about yesterday," the stranger replied calmly. "About your little secret. I asked if you truly want to explore how far you can take it, how much you can change, without your coworkers noticing." He looked oddly out of place, like someone out of a story. His neatly groomed beard and stylish suit gave him an air of control, almost theatrical. A faint, knowing smile rested on his face. Before I could even form the question in my mind, he answered it. "Yes," he said, "I can hear your thoughts. It's something I've always been able to do. That, and a few other talents." I stared, unsure whether to laugh or panic. "I've lived a very long time," he continued casually, as if discussing the weather. "Long enough to grow bored. I can move through your world unseen, reshape things to suit my interests, and entertain myself in ways most people couldn't imagine. But even that loses its charm eventually." His eyes locked onto mine. "So I look for something new. Something interesting." The question echoed again in my head. How far could I really go without anyone noticing? It had started as harmless curiosity. The feel of those hidden layers beneath my suit had been exciting, almost addictive. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing I carried a secret no one else could see. And yet, there were limits I had always assumed I'd never cross, lines I never intended to blur. The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if studying my thoughts. "I have a proposition," he said, his smile widening just a little. "A wager, if you will. Something that might entertain me, and give you the answer you're so curious about. You only need to agree to one condition," he said smoothly. "Once we part, you won't remember me, only the terms of our little wager. I prefer to keep the element of surprise intact. Wouldn't want you chatting about a mysterious figure in the office break room." I stared at him, unsure whether this was madness or something far stranger. "Here's how it works," he continued. "Each time you step in here, each time you relieve yourself, a change will take place. You'll have a choice beforehand. If you focus on a specific way you want to become more feminine, that idea will guide the transformation. If you don't, then I'll decide for you." My heart pounded as I tried to process it. "You won't notice anything immediately," he added. "But afterward, I'll leave you a small message in your thoughts, just enough so you understand what's been altered. And if ever you wish to stop for a time, all you need to think beforehand is, 'Not tonight, dear, I have a headache.' That will pause everything." He paused, letting it sink in. "At the end of 1 month, whatever you've become, that's what you'll remain. Unless, of course, you choose one of my prizes." "Prizes?" I echoed. He gestured toward the mirror. "First option, I give you $100,000, and you take on the form you see reflected there." I turned instinctively. For a moment, I didn't recognize the person staring back. It was still me, and yet completely transformed. The reflection was striking, refined, elegant, impossibly confident. It took me a few seconds to even comprehend what I was seeing. As I watched, the image shifted again, returning to my normal appearance, but subtly enhanced, sharper somehow, like a perfected version of myself. The second option, he went on, is to keep a more improved version of your current self. In that case, you receive a smaller reward, 5,000. But that choice is only available if you haven't fully crossed over by the end of the month. It felt unreal. Either path seemed to promise something extraordinary. When do I decide? I asked, my voice unsteady. No rush, he said lightly. You have until someone else walks in here today. Accept my offer, and the game begins. Refuse, and none of this ever happened. As if on cue, I heard the click of the washroom door unlocking. Panic, or maybe excitement, flashed through me. I accept your offer, I thought instinctively. A moment later, my boss stepped inside. I forced myself to act normal, making some offhand comment about the mess near the urinals. He glanced over, chuckled, and muttered something about bad aim before stepping up beside me. Trying to appear composed, I carefully avoided the puddle and finished up, my mind racing with the realization that something had already begun. I finished up at work, trying to act normal, when a strange thought slipped into my mind, almost like a rhyme I hadn't created. Your waist was too wide, your hips too slight, so I've reshaped them both to better fit the site. The words felt foreign, yet I somehow understood exactly what they meant. Only then did it hit me, I hadn't focused on anything before using the restroom. The first change had happened on its own. I stood there, unsettled, trying to trace where that message had come from, but there was nothing. No memory of the stranger beyond the wager itself. The rules, though, were crystal clear in my mind. 10 days. That's all I had until the end of the month. Come see me when you have a moment, Sam, my boss said casually. I need your input on the Preston report. I barely heard him. My attention was fixed on how loose my clothes suddenly felt. My waistband, which had always fit just right, now seemed almost oversized. The moment he left, I hurried into a stall and locked the door. My hands moved quickly as I adjusted my clothing, glancing down at myself in disbelief. My waist was noticeably slimmer, far more than I would have thought possible in a single moment. My hips, too, seemed slightly fuller, though it was harder to tell from that angle. That evening, I rushed home and went straight to the mirror. I didn't even pause to settle in, I needed to see for myself. The reflection confirmed it, the change was real. Later, absent-mindedly, I triggered another shift. Again, I hadn't thought ahead, and again the change came unprompted. This time, it was subtler but no less shocking. My hair had grown longer and thicker, falling further than it ever had before. The hair on my arms and chest had thinned dramatically, giving my appearance a softer, more refined look overall. I grabbed a measuring tape, needing something concrete. My waist had dropped significantly, my proportions shifting in ways that felt both unfamiliar and deliberate. There was no denying it anymore, this was happening. The next morning, I made sure to think ahead. If this was going to continue, I needed control. I focused carefully before heading into the bathroom, deciding on small, manageable adjustments rather than leaving things to chance. As the days passed, I became more aware of every detail, how I moved, how my clothes fit, how others reacted. Strangely, no one seemed to notice anything unusual. Even when my appearance subtly shifted, it was as if the world simply accepted it. By Friday, I realized I needed a plan. The end of the month was approaching quickly, and the decision waiting for me felt bigger with every change. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, taking everything in. The reflection staring back at me was no longer quite the same person who had started this. The differences were undeniable now, refined, altered, evolving. I studied myself carefully, thinking about what might come next and what I actually wanted. I decided there were still a couple of things that needed attention. My legs, for one, they didn't match the smooth look I now had in mind. That part was simple enough. Sitting on the edge of the tub, I carefully shaved them until they were completely smooth, the result matching the rest of my increasingly refined appearance. The other change took more resolve. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my outfit, imagining how it might look with a fuller chest. After hesitating and second-guessing myself several times, I finally gave in. I focused my thoughts and let the change happen. The effect was immediate and undeniable. My chest filled out, the shape now clearly pronounced beneath the fabric of my dress. Curious, and maybe a little reckless, I pushed it further, concentrating again. The result was even more dramatic, giving me a figure that was unmistakably feminine. My waist had narrowed even more, emphasizing the contrast. I stared at my reflection, stunned. The dress I wore now fit in a completely different way, accentuating curves that hadn't existed before. My legs were smooth, my silhouette transformed. And yet, my face and a few other features still carried traces of who I had been. A realization crept in: if I went much further, there might be no going back to my normal routine. Monday would be a problem. For the moment, though, I allowed myself to sit back and take it all in, letting the strangeness of it settle as I relaxed for the evening. The next morning, the phone rang early. It was my boss, asking if I could come in for a few hours to help revise the Preston report. Panic hit me instantly. There was no easy way to hide what had changed overnight. Thinking quickly, I claimed I was feeling sick. My voice must have sounded convincing enough, because he didn't push too hard, though he warned me not to bring anything contagious into the office later. Relieved, I hung up and headed to the bathroom, only to realize too late that I hadn't prepared my thoughts again. Another change followed, subtle but significant. My proportions shifted further, becoming smaller and more delicate overall. Before I could fully process it, I hurried to focus on something specific, trying to regain control. The next adjustment refined my features slightly, softening my appearance without making it too obvious. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My face had changed just enough to blur the line between masculine and feminine, creating an almost androgynous look. My hair, my skin, even my overall presence, everything was different now. It hit me then: there was no way this would go unnoticed for long. As I stood there, trying to figure out what to do next, the doorbell rang. I froze. Peeking outside, I saw my boss's car in the driveway. There was no avoiding it. I rushed to make myself look as presentable and as normal as possible, throwing on a thick robe to hide as much as I could. Taking a steadying breath, I opened the door. He stepped inside immediately, apologizing for the intrusion and launching straight into work talk. To my surprise, he didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Not the changes, not the differences, nothing. For the next hour or so, we sat together going over the report, as if everything were completely normal. Which, somehow, made the whole situation feel even stranger. We wrapped up the report, and my boss leaned back with a satisfied nod before saying he'd take me out for lunch. I must have looked confused, because he gave me a curious glance. "Sam," he said plainly, "I don't care how you choose to dress or express yourself. You're the best employee I've got. That's what matters. Now go get ready, I'm starving." His words hit me harder than anything else that had happened. He knew. I managed to ask, my voice caught somewhere between tones, "How long?" He shrugged. "Since last April. You came back from the washroom with something showing under your clothes. I covered for you, called a staff meeting, sent you to handle phones." Truth is, quite a few people had already noticed by then. I just stared at him. "We all agreed," he continued, "that it wasn't anyone's place to embarrass you. You've always been kind, respectful, that counted for more than anything else. So we kept quiet." For a moment, I didn't know what to think. All that time, I believed I had been hiding everything perfectly. "Now seriously," he added, glancing toward the stairs, "get dressed." I nodded and headed back to my room, my mind spinning. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I tried to process it all: the wager, the changes, and now this revelation. Nothing was as hidden as I thought, and yet somehow, no one had judged me for it. Then reality interrupted in a much simpler way. After all that coffee, I didn't have much choice but to head back to the bathroom. This time, I was more deliberate, focusing my thoughts carefully, making controlled adjustments instead of leaving anything to chance. By the time I came back downstairs, I had committed fully to the direction I'd been moving in. My appearance had shifted even further, my style, my posture, my presence, all aligning with the changes that had been building over the past few days. I caught my boss's expression as he looked up. There was surprise there, but not rejection, more like he was trying to reconcile what he saw with what he already knew. "Well?" I said, my voice now smoother, more confident than before. "Think the rest of the office will keep their promise?" He didn't answer right away. And in that moment, I realized something important. Whatever happened next, the final choice at the end of the month wasn't just about appearance or money, it was about deciding exactly who I wanted to be. And I didn't have much time left to figure that out.